morning, everybody. Welcome to Cannabis Live. I'm Craig Aronoff, along with Barton Morris. We welcome you to our 17th episode of Cannabis Live, brought to you by the Cannabis Legal Group. We are live every Friday morning, and we are bringing to you all the different aspects that we see here in Michigan's new medical marijuana market.
We have been talking about the different types of licensing that the new MMFLA is going to provide us, which we're super excited about. And today we're going to talk about the processing license, which in other words means that the marijuana, the usable marijuana for medical marijuana, will be processed, or the THC will be extracted from it to create other products, which is significantly important for the market and for the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And as you watch today, please like us, share us, send us questions. We'd love to see the interaction. And as we talk about processing, I think this is a really exciting thing for new industry in our state. When it really comes down to it, this is an area where people can truly stand out and brand themselves. And only until recently, just this past December, the definition of medical marijuana did not include medically marijuana-infused products. And so the amendment to the Medical Marijuana Act was very significant in allowing this license to come to fruition so that people can now actually manufacture, whether you want to make an edible or a topical or a tincture, different uses outside of smoking the flower of marijuana.
These uses actually are preferred by a lot of patients, medical patients, and what was crazy is that the original Medical Marijuana Act and the definition of usable marijuana didn't include extracted products, and which led to absurd results, which primarily were police officers knowing and watching somebody coming out of a dispensary and then asking them, do you have any extracted products? And somebody saying, yeah, I just got them from an dispensary, I'm a patient, and then they get arrested and charged with even sometimes extreme cases of being in possession of a controlled substance, which sometimes if it's not the plant marijuana, then it could be defined as a felony, and it was just ridiculous. As a criminal defense attorney, it was very offensive, knowing that the purpose and intent of the Medical Marijuana Act was to provide patients medical marijuana, and sometimes in this form was even more preferable than actually ingesting it through inhalation of the flower. So they did change it. The manner in which they changed it was super interesting, is because they had to create equivalence. Usable marijuana, at least under Section 4 of the Medical Marijuana Act, allows a patient to be in possession of no more than 2.5 ounces of marijuana, and so they had to create equivalents. And those equivalents were very favorable and very welcome to the medical marijuana community. So, for instance, 16 ounces of a solid, meaning like a brownie or a wax, is the equivalent of 1 ounce of flour. And then as far as liquids like an oil, 96 ounces of a liquid oil is equivalent to 1 ounce of flour. Super
yeah, and so it really gives people the opportunity to actually make different products that actually can meet, they can set themselves up for a period of time that makes sense, rather than having to make a brownie every time and go out and buy all the, the ingredients and everything and make a small little brownie. So, and that's just one example. And I think as we talk about medical marijuana and really looking at trying to change the perception of, it being a smoke product only, we have to remember that the caregiver-patient model never really had the proper type of encouragement for investment for caregivers to buy the right equipment, buy the right ingredients, do the right things to make a proper product for their patients. And what we're going to see with commercial licensing is now the opportunity for the proper investment for that innovation. And what comes with that is a lot of security, a lot of consistency. We'll know what the product is. We'll know what's in it. We'll know what it's made out of. We'll know it's made in a safe and secure and clean and properly regulated facility. And we hear a lot of horror stories about butane and butane extractions and issues that happen with that. And one, that's not going to be a legal mechanism to do extractions here. But separately, again, it's about the investment. And this was the cheapest form of doing it. And that's why people kind of gravitated to it. It was the easiest pathway into that entry. And meanwhile, they're doing it in the black market where the product they're creating is not even within the definition of medical marijuana. And so now that we've kind of reformed and amended the act, and that was really, just like we had to amend, our Controlled Substances Act to say that medical, marijuana has a medical purpose. This amendment to the MMMA now really opens up a whole new market. And of course, the licensing then allows us to properly invest in it. And I think what we're going to see is this is where true innovation and branding is going to come in. And so, the machine itself can, there's a lot of different techniques, a lot of different patents, a lot of different science that goes behind the extraction process. And then, of course, whatever is produced from that.
So when you're talking about the machine, you're talking about the instrumentation necessary to actually extract the THC from the plant, right?
Yeah, and the CBD. And let's not forget that what we're talking about is probably a lot of industrial hemp products as well, and coming from in using the non-THC, the non-psychoactive effect of the cannabis itself, the cannabinoids. There's other extraction that can be done now, and then ratioing things so that you can get a properly defined balance for specific elements.
I do want to note that of the importance of THC extraction, because THC as it exists in a plant that's unburned is not pharmacologically active, meaning that if any person took any flower marijuana and simply just ate it, it is not going to make them high. Not that there's not any benefit to it. There could be, and I've read some articles that say that the THCA, which is the acid form of the THC, does and can have medical benefit, but it's not going to provide any type of high people that generally associate with the ingestion of THC. So it needs to be changed. That THCA acid needs to be changed into the THC that people are generally familiar with, and that's what happens during that extraction process. I believe it's called carboxylation. Yeah. So, and that's what's going on. So we're extracting that THC so that it can be used for human consumption in a variety of ways. But it does have to go through that carboxylation process, to which then it can be then placed into a brownie, or we can discuss all of the different types of uses, which I suppose we can do that now.
Sure, why not?
I mean, I've seen clearly edibles, right? And so, and usually it seems to take the form of a lot of candies, and when we always talk about brownies and gummy bears, but it can be any edible. I mean, it could be placed in somebody's dinner. It could be in fish, it could be infused, and it could be marinated. I mean, I've heard of restaurants that literally specialize in the cooking and serving of all types of a variety of different foods that has been using extracted THC. So it's not just the brownies and cookies and gummy bears, but all types of different food items.
Yeah, and as we talk about it, and we mentioned gummy bears, and I guess it's important to recognize too, in this market, part of the regulation is going to be to try to do things that don't cause people to, maybe attract children too.
Oh, yeah.
And, a gummy bear is something kids associate with a candy. And so there's going to need to be, and we'll probably see in the regulations, a requirement that they don't shape them in a way that might be attractive.
Yeah, actually, you're right. You're absolutely right. When I say gummy bears, I generally mean gummies, because I just think
but it's easy to think gummy bear, absolutely, and stars and other
they
things.
They won't be bears, because they don't want anybody to think that it's candy. So there will be gummies. I've seen those.
Absolutely. And it's be cool, because they're going to come in, baggies and that are childproof as well. There's going to be new security that comes up to secure this, so even if it does have, inkling to try to look at it, the child might still have a difficulty getting into the Ziploc because of the requirements. And
tell me about that packaging that you had seen.
Sure. So, I think we've often said that, Michigan's at a kindergarten level versus where we've seen PhD level out west, where they've been doing this for 20 years. So there's these products, and it looks like a regular Ziploc or Glad, slide bag or baggie. It's not clear, so you can't necessarily see what's inside of it. But it does have, a mechanism, a locking mechanism. And when they handed it to me, the operators, And this is just, one of the pixes and axes of the industry, so to speak. When he handed it to us, he said, try to open it. For the life of me, I couldn't open it. I think I gave it to you an hour or so later and said, here, try this. This is the coolest thing. And it had a little area where you put your thumb there, a spot, and that opens the lock, and then it was easy to open. So once you understood it, it was easy. But certainly it was something that a child would have a hard time dealing with. And then similar, we saw boxes that had, required dexterity, that required 2 pressure points to open the box. And so again, there could be some safety, mechanisms in boxes of how flour is offered as well in some situations. So, but I think this is going to be part of what we expect from our operators, the people getting into this industry, the licensees. When we're going to the state, we're considering all these various angles of not only what our product will be, but how it's going to be safe on the shelf, and not something that is going to be easily used by kids in the wrong manner.
Also, product labeling has to be discussed as well, because each of these gummies or each of these individual serving sizes is going to have to be identified with a particular amount of THC, usually expressed in milligrams, in order to advise the user as to how much they're going to be taking, which of course then it directly implicates something that we're going to talk about next week, is testing facilities, safety compliance facilities, because each of these facilities is going to be responsible for identifying the amount of THC expressed in milligrams that's contained within each unit of product, in order to give the users on notice how much they're taking. And it's also going to be another significant issue with respect to the reliability of these testing facilities, because I know from my experience that sometimes it's difficult, for the individuals creating these products to ensure that each individual piece has the same amount or a relatively similar amount. And also there's going to be an issue with respect to the manner in which that these facilities are able to identify precisely, or at least to some degree of certainty, reliable degree of certainty, how much THC exists in each one of these individual pieces. And so when the testing facility tests it and then says, okay, I'm going to think that there's 10 milligrams in here, and then it gets on the shelves, and then it gets independently tested, and then it finds out that there's 2, or even worse, that there's 20, that's going to be a particular issue that's going to be coming up. It has come up in other regulated markets in other states. It is going to be an issue here. It's something that processors should be aware of, and perhaps promote their own independent chemical testing for potency of their own products for their cannabinoids.
And I think that's going to be very important. And what's also going to happen is dosing within a particular product itself. And so what we might see on the shelf side by side is something that has 5 nanograms. The next one has 10, and
milligrams.
15 milligrams. And set it, and it's set up in a way with a ratio of 5:1 CBD to THC, and then maybe one that's 2:7 in the opposite direction. Because they're really targeting specific people with specific needs as medicine. It's just like you can get regular aspirin or extra strength aspirin. You can get different kinds of pain relievers that do different things, whether it's an anti-inflammatory or a nerve blocking type of medicine or a muscle relaxer, if we go through Aleve and acetaminophen and whatnot. And so on the same shelf from the same companies, we're going to see these processors have the opportunity to really target a niche in the market. And again, the consistency and the testing and the process and how they get through that process will be what dictates how good their product will stand up. And then, of course, you go through branding and labeling and all the other regulatory requirements we're going to expect to see in this side of the industry. And that brings me to another point about edibles. We're going to be talking about commercial kitchens. We're not talking about basements where brownies are made, or your house where brownies are made, where you might have pets. You might not have a clean facility for purposes of delivering food the way you would if you're a commercial kitchen. So if you're a processor who's planning on getting into the medical space, and you're going to have to remember that your kitchen is going to be regulated with the same kind of OSHA requirements that any other restaurant or candy manufacturer or nut factory or anybody offering food is going to be required to do. And so, as you're looking for facilities, you got to keep in mind that if your kitchen is there, it's got to be clean. It's going to have to be separated. You're going to have to go through with the inspector, both at the local level and with the county OSHA inspectors, to make sure that you don't get shut down from having, improper kitchen, even though your process for the extraction is perfect. It's going to be, you got to remember, you're still in the business of delivering food.
Yeah, and in a safe manner,
Yeah.
and a manner that would be, as a manner to be reasonably expected by the state and by federal regulation. And remember, of course, federal regulation is not something that is involved in these licenses right now, but I, for one, am certain that it will be. And so I think that when preparing for a license and for creating these facilities, the individuals that are wanting this license are going to have to keep in mind and take precautions to ensure that when the federal government does get involved, that they're able to satisfy those requirements as well. And so even if it's not necessary now, it's going to be necessary. It's very possible, very likely, it's going to be necessary in the future. So start right now. Don't cut corners right now simply because the federal government doesn't seem to be regulating it right now. The FDA and OSHA, is OSHA federal?
Well, it's my OSHA and OSHA, so
right. So there's a federal OSHA,
yeah.
right, and then there's a Michigan OSHA. So Michigan is certainly going to have to be complied with. Michigan regulations are certainly going to have specific, strict requirements with respect to the production of these food products, but the federal government is going to as well. And don't cut corners when it comes to creating that facility, because all of these things, I mean, it's food. People are going to be eating this stuff, and particular requirements have to be met.
And I think that's one area of it. Next thing you know, in the same factory, or maybe under the same processing license, while they're making medibles off their kitchen, they could be doing ointments and using the same extracted infused product and putting it in other type of marketed areas. So maybe they create a topical ointment that's good for helping with skin rashes and people that are undergoing radiation to help heal the site and whatnot. Or possibly even drops where can be made from there. So in each of within a single facility, there might be multiple different delivery forms, and each one is going to be separately regulated for purposes of what that product entails. So if it's a cooked product, it's going to have the issues we mentioned before. If it's not, it's going to have other issues. And so, as we start to look at our branding, as we start working with operators seeking a processing license, we've talked standard operating procedures in the past. It's one thing to say, here's our business plan, which is going to be required at the state, but we'll also start to break down what the products are, and that we're thinking our way through each of the minutiae of the steps to set ourselves up for success. And that goes from even maybe looking at regulations likely to come down the line when this becomes more mainstream, and medical marijuana could very well be able to be nationwide. And so that's where we're starting with the foundation today. Now that brings us to Michigan licensing, and we know that the regulations are still being prepared. So there's a lot of things that we're going to see come down in the next several weeks and months. But there's a few things that we know for sure. In other words, you need to start with a compliant piece of property. Just like we said with the growers last week when we went through the growers, or 2 weeks ago, just like we said with provisioning centers, the Michigan licensing process starts with, do you have a piece of property in a city, township, or village that has an ordinance, and is your property zoned correctly? If either of those questions are answered no, they don't even care what your name is or the rest of your application, because there's no reason to bother looking at it. You don't have a proper license. And so, I think that's the reality of what we're going to see. So remember, we start off with, where are we going to operate, and are we allowed to do it there if we can get a license?
These cities are beginning to have more particular stance on processing to give a license. It's one thing to give a license to somebody who wants to grow, and then another to do a dispensary or provisioning center. But processing has a lot more, not maybe more, but different considerations for a municipality. For instance, what type of equipment is going to be used, and what type of damage or what type of risk that can be created with respect to this type of equipment. And so some of these cities, don't have any specific regulations, but I'm seeing now that some cities are getting hip to the fact that they need to have a little bit more oversight on processors. So that's something that anybody looking for a license needs to be advised of and understand that some cities are, especially when their fire departments get involved, because a lot of these fire departments have already encountered dangerous situations with caregivers having extraction facilities within their basement, and then fires erupt, and then other adjacent properties get put in risk for damage. And so that's something that people need to consider, is that these municipalities are being more strict on processors. And I'm not suggesting that they're going to get so strict that they're going to take them out of the market. But I do believe that it's something that people kind of overlook. They think that just getting a processor's license is going to be easy in a particular municipality, and that's not necessarily true.
Well, and I think that this is a project that you and I have already started working on, and something that we're going to be continuing to work on, where we're going to be looking to change people's understanding of what medical marijuana is and what the delivery forms are, and as well as what the extraction processes are. Most of what that you're describing is what we were forced to do in the state, where first medical marijuana infused product was not defined as a medicine, and secondly, where there was no financial incentive to really make a properly set up facility, because that wasn't the way our laws structured. So I think when we're dealing with townships, and this is a conversation that we have regularly as we're traveling the state, it's the butane issues are a problem. That's why we need a regulated licensed facility. It's specifically the reason why, for no other reason. So now what we need to do is demonstrate to the municipality, this is the process. We got to educate them on what a CO2 extraction looks like, and what the machines are like, and how they have a lot of other areas in the automotive sector that they're using extractions and paints and other lead. There's other poisons out there being used in their town. They're going to be worse than this if they fully understand what the machines do and are, and that you're not going to the dangerous, cheapest way to do it because that's the only opportunity you have, but rather you're making a real investment. And that's part of what we're asking the state to see too, is here's our business plan, here's the money we're spending, here's the process we're doing. Township, this is what this is going to look like, and why fire suppression is mitigated, and why those issues that you previously saw, this is the cure and the solution instead of total prohibition. And I think that, again, the re-education of that is going to be huge.
Actually, that's what I was about to say. The education is what's necessary, providing that these city council members and the planning commission and their department health officials and their public safety officials with the education necessary to understand the safety that is associated with a properly set up processing facility, or when a facility is unsafe. If they don't have these, in a lot of these municipalities, they do, especially the larger ones, they do have experience with these other types of operators of other types of chemically treated different products, right?
Absolutely.
But they don't have any, or generally don't have any experience with the processing of THC and the several different manners of doing it safely, and the manner in which that we do it safely. So education is certainly very important.
Yeah, and so again, through the licensing, I guess just in a nutshell, there's the business planning, you got to prove your capital, and I think as I was mentioning earlier, in processing, there's going to be opportunity for a smaller player. There's discussion. The way the statute's written right now, a processing center has to sell their dispensary. That's the only transfer allowed under the Act. There is discussion for an amendment that hopefully will prove to be true, where processors can sell to processors. So if you're somebody that has enough capital to set up a kitchen and you can make really, really good medibles from your small kitchen, you should be able to buy wholesale butter or wholesale extraction, whatever you need, both CBD as well as THC. So that's going to be a market where people, the microbrew concept we've discussed before, that's where I think there's going to be new opportunities with people that don't have capital to buy the full extraction process, but might still fit into the market in a small way and then grow from there.
I think they will. I think the state has already understands that this issue needs to be addressed, because the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, as it's written right now, doesn't address it. The transfer of cannabis medical cannabis from a processor to a processor. That's something that's going to be necessary for the industry, and so I'm quite certain that we're going to see an amendment of the act in order to allow for that. Another issue that's has to be addressed is the degree to which that processor is going to allow it to have their facility within another licensed facility, like a cultivator or a grower. It is going to be several businesses' business model to have a grow operation and then have a processing operation in the same facility. That's not necessarily addressed in the act. I don't think it's actually excluded from the act. So I believe that, well, I know after speaking to Shelley and hearing from Shelley Egerton about this particular issue, they are going to address this issue to allow, or at least they're going to discuss whether to allow multiple licenses to be contained in one facility, so that can happen, because that just seems to be what's most efficient for a lot of different operations and operators. And then I think that's going to lead to the discussion as to whether multiple growers can be within the same facility, and then multiple licenses, and then how many plants. And certainly there's going to be large issues that are related to the number of licenses and different facilities, and that's all going to be coming out, which I think is what I've been told is the licensing, regulations, at least draft emergency regulations, should be coming out in September, which is only a month away. Today is July 28th, and so in about 30, 45 days, I think we should be having some draft regulations from which that we're able to, that we're able to get some more answers about a lot of these issues. I'm quite certain that our shows are going to be a lot more discussing those issues when it comes time, and we very much look forward to that. But
I think it's safe to say we'll be doing some seminars too. Yeah, I think. I think
we actually have a date for our next seminar, which is going to be September 22nd. In Detroit and Kilboe Hall again. Our last seminar was in Kilboe Hall, and it was a fantastic facility. It was a great seminar. It was our best one yet. This one we were planning on doing even better, but then we're running out of time, so maybe we want to get to some questions. I also wanted to mention the website that you see there in your upper left-hand corner, which is a new page that we created to help people identify the cities in which that have gone on record to state that they are going to either have passed an enabling license in order for a medical marijuana facility, or that is already maybe opted in, and their council members has passed a resolution stating that they're going to pass an enabling license for a facility. Or we even have some cities on there that we believe are going to. So a lot of people have been asking us about that, and we're providing that on our page at the cannabis-legal-group.com/municipalities, and we're going to keep that updated. We're going to take every effort to ensure that it remains updated, and we ask for others' assistance because there's how many cities in the state?
Something like 1,500 cities, townships, and villages that need to take this up, and you'll see
there's a lot of activity going on. So we're gonna endeavor to.
So we do ask for your help on that. If you see something that you think is inaccurate, needs to be updated, please let us know. If you want to work with us, by all means, give us a call at 248-541-2600. Go to our website, cannabis-legal-group.com. We do offer consultations, $500 consultations, and then, we look to work with people to be successfully licensed from there.
So I wanted to ask a question as to what we can do to assist. Just call the office here, and we can schedule an appointment to meet with you, and then we're going to be able to do everything necessary to be able to get you started and have the entire process streamlined for you so that you can be successful.
So next week we're going to be talking about testing facilities. We're kind of just notching down all the different licenses. So testing facilities, this is an area that is near and dear to Mr. Morris's heart in the laboratory and forensic areas in the science behind cannabis and medicine. And so we'll look forward to being there live next Friday morning. Look for us here at Cannabis Law.